All right, welcome to CEO Money. I'm Michael Yorba. Thanks for joining us. I have Joel Ross, CEO, Citadel Realty Advisors. And I found Ross because one of his friends forwarded his Ross Rant out. And quite frankly, it's very difficult for me to get through at least the first paragraph of most journalists that I run across. Now, Ross doesn't hold himself out as a journalist, but his writing style and his opinions I found riveting first, second, relevant. So I wanted to invite Joel onto the show so maybe he can share some of these opinions with our listening audience. So Ross, or Joel, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Now, before we get into today's rant, what you're talking about, which is relevant to what's going on in the world now, give our viewing audience some background on how the Ross Rant got started.
Sure. Well, I began my career in Wall Street as an investment banker back in 1965, so I've been around an awfully long time. In 2003, I created the first hotel CMBS program. And I started CMBS. In 2007, it was actually May 9th of 2007, a couple of us, about five of us, very senior people out of Wall Street, including from one of the credit rating agencies, had lunch at a conference. And we talked about when the crash was coming and how terrible it was going to be. And we predicted the beginnings would be late July of 2007, which is actually when it happened to start. And it got worse from there. And so I belong to a little group of entrepreneurs, 12 guys. We meet monthly to talk about whatever. And I started producing this little email to them regarding my predictions about the crash, et cetera. And then in January of 2008, I was at a hotel conference and started talking about the crash, and people were screaming at me and telling me I was an idiot. But then there you go. In any event, the Ross Rant became what it is today, which is about 300 people or more on the mailing list, and best as I can tell, a couple of thousand more people who get it sent to them by people who are on the list. And it's whatever I happen to be thinking about at the time, whether it's business or non-business, a little bit of politics. And I just write in my style, which seems to go over well with a bunch of people.
It did with me. I read it and it kept my interest all the way through the entire article, which is very difficult to do. Now, what is the latest article that you wrote about? And let's open that up so we can have a frank discussion about it. And I want to bring your opinion out.
Well, there's a couple of things. First is the Cavanaugh situation, which, putting aside who's right, who's wrong, et cetera, I just think the way it's playing out is dreadful for the country because of the way it's being handled by the Democrats. And if anybody can hurl some kind of accusation at anybody in government without it being corroborated, and it could stop a Supreme Court justice or a cabinet member or whoever, that's really an awful thing for the country. So I don't know how this is going to play out on Thursday, but my guess is he will be confirmed. I just have a lot of concern about if he's not confirmed because of all these accusations. I think the ramifications for the country and for what goes on in Congress could be dreadful. And I don't know what may happen out of that, but if the Republicans then go, well, now I'm going to do to you what you did to us, then nothing gets done in Washington, and maybe that's a good thing that Congress doesn't do anything. But it would be nice if they actually did something about all the things that need happening, and that's a real concern of mine. The other thing, which there's two other things. One is the trade situation. Mm-hmm. As of listening to the news this morning, apparently Trump did a deal with South Korea. He's done the deal with Mexico. in my view, the EU has no choice but to do a deal, because with Brexit potentially going to be a hard Brexit, they can't afford to have a trade war with the US at the same time. And they've tentatively agreed to whatever it is they've agreed to. So I believe that the EU will fall in place, and Trudeau will have no choice but to fall in place. He can stomp his feet and try to put on a show for the moment, but he'll fall in place. And Abe, I believe, will do a deal now that South Korea's done a deal. And so all of the countries other than China will be dealt with. Now, whether or not the trade deals make a huge difference in our trading, I don't know, because I don't know what's in those deals. I'm not an international trade person, so I can't even opine, and especially not knowing exactly what they say, I sure as hell can't opine. But presumably it'll get that off the table, and WTO hopefully will be reconstructed, since it's kind of like the UN now, and it has all these rules that nobody ever follows, mainly the Chinese. So the world said, well, let's bring China into the WTO and make them behave, and they're in WTO and they don't behave. And I think it's going to be a long battle between us and China. But at the end of the day, the whole world is suffering from the same problem, especially on IP theft, et cetera, as we are. And so I think over time, the Chinese will be forced to give in. The last issue, which I wanted to bring up, is Moody's Economics and JP Morgan have both forecast that by sometime in 2020, the economy will start going the wrong direction. And I know from Moody's that that's based on the fact that they believe the fiscal stimulus we're now experiencing of the tax cuts and the excessive spending from the last budget will have worn off, and that the deficit will have grown so large and interest rates will accommodate that by being too high, and will turn into a recession. I've spoken to at least one of those two groups, and I've said, you know, there's so many black swans around right now, and so much going on, whether it's internationally, domestically, with the election, et cetera. It's really impossible to know today where we'll be in 2020. Maybe the Republicans will pull it out. Maybe this whole Cavanaugh situation, I believe, will get the Republicans so fired up, they're going to go to the polls, and maybe the Republicans will hold the House. I have no idea. I mean, it should be that the Republicans do hold the House based on the economy doing so well, but this is a weird time, and it's hard to tell.
You know, I think it's probably more than just the economy at this point. Now it's turned into a cause, a belief system. We've seen this in history time and time again. When people are, I think that one of the keynotes that happened to kind of tip the scales was the despicable comment that everybody decided that, you know what, if you're really going to do that, now it's on. I got a feeling that it's more than just an economic issue with people, although that is a big issue, having all of the numbers work out the way that they are. That's just, I wanted to throw that out there to you because I want to start a conversation with you, not just have a monologue here. And the other issue that we talked about, or you brought up, was Europe, the trade. And from what I understand, I recently had somebody in from Europe, from Brussels, and they're a lawyer and an economist from there. And one of the conversations that they were having was that the timing couldn't be better for Trump to have these kind of positions and stances in a change in U.S. policy when it comes to trade, because most of the countries, including China, are not doing as well as they would like us to believe. So having a tough stance to change the structure of the trade deals couldn't be better for timing, because he's kind of got them backed up against a barrel that could be a big problem for them if they don't somehow come to the table. And yeah, I agree with you. They can stomp and rant and rave all they want, but at the bottom line, France is in no condition to deal with anybody right now. They're completely upside down with the deficit, the off-book deficits that they have. And Germany is definitely going to have to back Deutsche Bank, which has got all the debt from Greece. And Italy, even though they say that they're not doing so well, they have backing from a lot of sources that probably we shouldn't mention on air, that they're probably going to be able to weather the storm. So the biggest problem that most of them are going to face is now you've got to own up to all of the stuff that you've owed us for over the years that the previous administrations have given you. Does that make sense to you? Does that?
I think that the other thing that we know is going on is Merkel is no longer really in charge of the German government the way she was, which put her basically in charge of the EU to do whatever she wanted. And now, in the last week, her coalition is fraying, and so she doesn't have any remotely near the power that she had. That destabilizes the politics of the EU even more, plus Italy, plus Poland and Hungary saying, we're not going to do what you tell us anymore. And so the entire political situation in the EU, to me, is unstable, and the economy is weak, and Macron's approval rating is, I think, 29% or something like that. So you're quite right that nobody over there is in a position to make demands at all, and we are. And Trump didn't, I'm sure, pick this timing out of the air. No. He knew exactly what the situation was, and China has got some serious problems, not just with the economy, but demographics and otherwise, and with the Muslims out west, etc. And Xi can try to do what he's doing with the Belt and Road project, but I think a lot of those Southeast Asian countries are going, wait a minute, now I owe $20 billion I can never pay. Maybe I shouldn't go ahead with this. So you're right, the rest of the world has a lot of problems. Trump is in a really good position with the U.S. economy as strong as it is. And I'm guessing this quarter we're going to be 4.2, 4.3, who knows. So there's going to be a continuation of good growth. And if we settle the trade disputes in the next 30 days, which is very possible, the stock market will go up another 1,000 points or something.
My only concern on this whole structure is, yes, I see that that would give us a big plus for our economy, but pushing Europe and Asia too hard, that's where maybe the recession, if not potential depression, could start. It would start over there and then migrate back to us through the daisy chain of debt that we have in our banking system propping up their system. How do you feel about that statement?
That's entirely possible, and I think that is what Moody's and JP Morgan are concerned about, that we're building up a deficit thanks largely to the extra $300 billion that the Democrats rammed into the budget the last time around. And until we get through this election, and if the Democrats win the House, then it's hopeless to cut entitlements. But until they start doing what everybody knows they need to do and really working on cutting the deficit, which I don't know if that's really ever going to happen, it's not a good picture. And if the rest of the world gets weaker and weaker, there's going to be blowback because we can't be an island forever in the world economy.
I agree with you. Joel, unless there's anything else you brought up, I really enjoyed having you on the show. I very rarely get to have these conversations with people, let alone on the show. But I really want to extend my invitation for you to come back with the next Ross Rant that we can have a discussion over.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. You've been watching CEO Money with Michael Yorba. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.